So when you would buy a property in the UK, I think people think traditionally there's one way to rent it, which is you just rent it out on an annual basis to a tenant, family or whoever really, and that's the primary way that you would get your rent. However, we're aware that there's actually a few different ways you can rent your property. Some provide you with more income than others. Some are better for other reasons. I know you yourself are actually an owner of properties where you rent them out in different ways yourself, and we work with different types of investments. What's been I think one most common one is a HMO, so house of multiple occupancy. How's your experience with that? How have you found it to work, as opposed to, I don't know, just renting it out individually? And what is it as well?
Well, I mean, so we've got a 6-bed HMO. What's good about a HMO is that you should, in theory, make a slightly better return than if it was just on a standard one person or one family long-term rental. Purely because you've got more people living in there, you can charge a little bit more per room because you're providing all the facilities. So there's your cleaner, your internet or utilities are all in. Then you should do fairly well on it. So I like them, but at the same time, there's a lot more hassle and headache with a HMO. When you've got 6 people living there, they're not necessarily all 6 friends, they're 6 individual people. It could be more. Some people have bigger HMOs, and chances are they're going to fall out at some point. So you've got those issues to deal with. So you end up people arguing and falling out and complaining about that person plays their music too loud, or that person doesn't wash their pots properly, or that person's TV, they're watching TV at midnight, or that person smells, or whatever, So you're sort of the mediator of that. Obviously, you can use a management company, which I do now because it makes life a lot easier. Obviously, their fees are a little bit higher because they've got to deal with more stuff.
It's a lot of work,
More work,
And then just to be clear as well, because when we're discussing actually renting out a 6-bedroom house, for example, we're not talking about just renting it out and 6 friends coming over. You rent out each room individually using, I think it's like, what's that, spareroom.com and things like this.
There's always different.
So it's people in and out constantly.
Turnover is typically a lot higher.
Always different. So you might have one room that's empty for a couple of months sometimes. It's never really consistent.
No, you might have people moving. I mean, I think we've got 3 of the tenants that are longer term. There's one guy that's been there for years. But most people are sort of in and out, 3 months, 6 months, something like that, and then they move on. Because nobody wants to necessarily live like that forever. They eventually want their own space, or they might meet somebody and then they get a share with their partner or whatever. So higher turnover, a bit more involvement in terms of, like I said, management, maintenance, etc. You've got to have cleaners going in. You typically would need a license now as well.
It's not easy.
It's not easy and not cheap to get the licensing.
And councils are giving them out anymore.
In a lot of areas, you've got something called Article 4. So that basically means that if you've got a property that's already a HMO within an Article 4 area, fine, cool, you can carry on renting it. If you buy another property within an Article 4 area and you want to convert it into a HMO, you pretty much forget it.
And it's not just a house with, let's say, 5 rooms. They can be as small as 3 rooms, but I'm aware that you have to have certain things in the house.
You've got to have
the right window thickness. You've got to have like a fire exhaust thing.
You've got to have the fire-resistant doors that take a certain amount of time to burn through. If it's over a certain number of floors, you need to have self-closing doors as well, fire doors. You need to have fire extinguishers, which need to be checked. You need to have a fire alarm that also is regularly checked and serviced, etc.
Like a hostel, you've got to have hostel standards.
You're responsible. You've got 6 people living there. You're responsible for their safety. So you've got to make sure these things are checked. And obviously that needs to be done regularly as well. And if you miss it, the fines are quite bad. And getting back to the licensing, if you try and do it without a licensing, the fines are colossal. So it just isn't worth it. So although I think they're brilliant because you can generate high returns, unless that's sort of, you know, you're partnered up with somebody who's done it before, or you've done it yourself before and you've got a bit of experience in it, it's not necessarily something I would advise to a first-time investor.
No.
Purely because there's a lot of potential pitfalls, and if you get it wrong, it can end up costing you an arm and a leg.
I know. I think my dad used to own a HMO back in the UK.
Yeah.
And he told me it was the biggest headache he'd ever had.
Yeah.
At some point, they decided they didn't want to pay rent, and you've got this squatters' rights, and there's loads of things that it just becomes a huge headache, and then it's just basically. Yeah. He said
we've had it before. I mean, we've had times where we've had the police have gone round because so and so's invited all their pals over to have a bit of a party. And
chaos.
5 other tenants there, like, whoa, what's going on here?
Yeah, and the bigger the HMO, the more chaotic it probably.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, but there are some HMOs that are great. I've got friends that have done it, and that's their area of expertise, and they do it day.
That's their full-time job.
That's their full-time job, which it needs somebody to manage.
Yeah.
So I think they're great, but at the same time, it depends how involved you want to be. If you're looking for purely passive income, you can still generate high returns in renting through other ways. Yeah. Obviously, long-term rentals is the least headache. It should be, in theory.
Yeah, it should be.
Tenants, right location. Family or an individual or a couple or whatever moves into the property on a 12-month contract.
A couple of years, even
they'll
longer.
Probably stay there for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Maintenance-wise, as long as you've done the right checks on them, there should be a good enough
quite simple
tenant to move in, and they're not going to trash your property.
Yeah.
And if you bring a letting agent in to manage it, they shouldn't charge you the earth, maybe 8% of the rental income. They'll take care of it, so it should be fairly hands-off. Yes, that's the lowest amount of return of the different options you're going to make, but as a return on investment, if you do it in the right way with a mortgage, you still should be talking 10% plus in the right areas. So yeah, I mean that's they're the first 2 options, I would say. Then you got a couple of others.
I mean, I think everyone's aware of the main renting it out on an annual basis, using a buy-to-let mortgage or just cash, and I think that's obviously what most people do, and I think it does work. I think you're right at what you said. Like the advantage of doing that is it's just simple, it's clean. Your return on investment, it may not be as high as doing these other methods. However, it's consistent, and I think that's what people want. Yeah. They do want consistency. I think another one that I personally like more than probably the most out of the rest of them is serviced accommodation. Whether you are renting it yourself through serviced accommodation or using a management company, I personally think there's a lot of benefits to it. I think it's actually where you can get the most amount of money from your property. I think it does have to be a certain type of property. I don't think it can be
not just anything.
Anything. You have to have, for serviced accommodation, a house or an apartment, typically more of an apartment, in a city centre location. Yeah. Maybe 2, 3, or maybe 2 to 3 bed, maybe 1 bed as well. And of course, the way that works is you put it on something like Airbnb and you rent it on a short-term basis where you are getting maybe 100, 200, depending where it is.
Or similar rate to what you would get. You charge like a hotel.
Like a hotel per night, above £100 to £200 per night. And then over a long period of time, that will make you a lot more money than just renting it out on a short-term, on a long-term basis. As I said though, with something like that, it does have to be the right location, I think. So it has to be like a big city or maybe the countryside.
Where there's demand from business travellers or tourists or people that are actually coming to visit it. Visit the area. Say for example it was next to a big business district where you got loads of big companies and people coming in and out every week, for work. Or if you were close to a big entertainment complex, or like for example the O2 Arena in London. I know a lot of the apartments near there are short-term rentals. So when you've got 3 or 4 concerts every week, obviously not now, but 3 or 4 concerts a week with best part of 20,000 people going there, a lot of people want to stay for the night. So they go, yeah, you can stay here, but we'll charge you £300 a night or £250 a night.
Yeah, they'll up it on that day.
Yeah, they'll up it on those days. So they only rent it for maybe 3 or 4 nights a week, but they're making £1,000 a week.
Yeah, as opposed to renting £1,000 a month. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly,
so yeah, it's interesting to say that things like O2 Arenas, like having properties in these areas.
Yeah.
I know for serviced accommodation, I think we like Manchester for that, because Manchester has a lot of reasons for people to be there. So you've got, again,
it's
like
not just one.
Yeah, you've got like the O2 Arenas. You've got a lot of people travelling there for business reasons. It's got the international sort of airlines, which means people are coming in to and from the city internationally constantly.
All the time. You've got great shopping there as well.
Yeah. 2 football teams, which you'll have football fans who use.
And they're global football teams.
Yeah.
It's not like you've just got people travelling in from just outside the city. You've got people that travel in from all over the world each week to go and watch Man United and Man City. When there are obviously times where you've got both teams playing at the same time on a Saturday or a Wednesday or whatever. So across the two clubs, you've got over 100,000 people just travelling into Manchester. Yes, not everybody is not a local. Some people are obviously already living in Manchester.
Yeah.
Of that 100,000 people,
you can have the fans from other teams anyway
and you've got all the fans, exactly.
That's sort of the main reason.
There's a lot of people, and especially they're both clubs that play in Europe as well. So you've got, whenever they have their European games, people that fly over. They're not going to fly home the same night, the same day. They'll stay in the city, probably make a holiday of it for maybe 3 days, as you would if you were going the other way. And they all need somewhere to stay. And people, things like hotels are great, but if you're staying for 3 days or a week or 2 weeks or a month or whatever, which some people do for whatever reason, it's a bit nicer to have your own apartment.
Yeah, people like it.
You've got your own kitchen.
Yeah.
You still get your cleaner coming in every day to clean and change your towels and change your bed linen and all that. The only difference is you haven't got room service, but
people don't always want that.
People don't bother about it.
Yeah.
And if it's a good building with all the facilities, gym, pool, all of that, same as a hotel, same as a 5-star hotel. So yeah, you can see why there's a lot of people in places like Manchester, as an example, that are doing Airbnb and short-term rentals, making a fortune.
What's interesting about that as well is, I think when people think of using service or hotels or things like this, it's not seasonal. It's you're not going to a hot country where during the summer period, or maybe the other sort of side of the world, you're going there to be near a beach or to be in the heat, whatever. But that's not, you're not going to really find that. You might find more people coming in the summer period, but you'll find throughout the whole entire year you'll have reasons.
Christmas,
exactly. Yeah,
people go there to shop. See the lights being turned on, or go and see pantomimes, or whatever. They have, if it's a company that have offices all over the area, they might bring everybody together. For like a big staff party. All these sorts of things. So I've done it myself when I've booked to go to to Manchester.
I do as well.
I always go on Airbnb now, because the hotels there just isn't enough rooms, and then their rates are £200 for something half decent, £250 a night, and you're like, I may as well just get a nice apartment for 100 quid, 150 quid.
I think you find anyway, you just get a lot of people who will just for the weekend, a couple of friends might go to, it doesn't have to be Manchester, it could be like places like Birmingham, Leeds, even like places like Edinburgh, pretty much all of the major places across the UK.
Edinburgh's an interesting one, because you have the Edinburgh Festival every...
Fringe, well,
obviously not this year, but every year you have that. And I've been up before, and it's ridiculous.
Impossible.
I mean, even like the cheapest hotels that usually might be £40 a night, £300, £350 a night. Then you go, okay, well, we'll get an Airbnb. Even then, the apartment's in a half decent location. That normally might cost £700-800 a month. All of a sudden jump up to like £4,000 a month. It's just, or it's a couple of big £1,000 a week type thing.
But I think one thing I quite like about, I think what a lot of people do like about having serviced accommodation investments, especially if it's a nice apartment in an area that you like and you also like to visit, you're not like, okay, this tenant lives in my property year round, and I have to
evict them.
I have to evict them just to use it
which
for
you
a week,
can't do,
you know, which you're not going to do anyway. You know, you can personally use it for the times that you want to use it. Say, no, it's not available during this time, and therefore
block out those 2.
Block out. It doesn't cost you anything anyway because it's yours.
Yeah, block out those 2 weeks. I'm going to go and stay in my property.
So, and then as soon as you leave, it's back on to using serviced accommodation again, and you know, it gives you that opportunity to use it when you like.
Okay, so obviously we love serviced accommodation. What playing devil's advocate? Why? Because I've like HMOs, for example. I think there's pros and cons.
Yeah.
There's obviously pros and cons for serviced accommodation.
Yeah. I think the biggest one is the people who are staying there. You don't know.
Don't know who they are.
Well, you don't know who they are, but it's consistently new people.
Yeah.
Quite often, anyway. You're not going to always get the perfect sort of people staying there. Yeah. Things can go wrong. People.
Yeah, but then you're always holding. You know, they have to pay a deposit.
Yeah, I mean there is obviously a deposit, but
pay for it.
they're not. No one's going to treat this like it's their home. You know, people will treat it like a hotel, and sometimes when people treat things like a hotel, they're not always kept in the best condition. Maybe the furniture that's in there or whatever it might be would you know, probably get worn out quicker or whatever it is. I know there's people who you can get to manage it for you, and that they'll pretty much take care of everything. But I think you have to understand that if you are going to do this, and that's the sort of method you want to rent it.
Yeah, but I think that's, you know, like I said, the trade-off is you're charging them
a lot of money,
and you know, typically you charge a fairly chunky holding deposit, which, you know, most people would want back. So I think you know, yes, you're right. There are some horror stories out there.
Yeah.
So a lot of the horror stories I've heard about serviced accommodation generally are the larger properties. So when it's, you know, 3 or 4 bedrooms, a big apartment or a house or something like that, that people see as, right, let's rent that and have a party in there. Which, you know, if it's a 1 bed or a 2 bed,
it's not. Yeah, that's not.
It's, you know, there's not enough space for it really. So you're less likely to get that sort of thing.
I think you're right about that. I think it's that is sort of the thing you're find.
What about the fact that you don't always know what your income's going to be potentially because it goes up and down?
Yeah, stuff can go wrong. Well, it doesn't go wrong, but I think look at what's happening right now with sort of this year, COVID-19. That's going to have an effect on if you were just renting it just yourself, only you were managing it. You decided that you were going to do this, and you didn't get a long-term tenant who had a secure job or whatever was paying the rent, and you decided to do this. You know, since probably February onwards, you would have had very little amount of bookings and people staying in it. I mean, not saying you wouldn't have had anything, but
you're going to have less tourists. But then there's also an opportunity because obviously we're speaking to different companies. There's a couple of management companies I spoke to that are in Manchester, just to get their sort of take on it. You know, how they got on. They do short-term rentals. And they're saying, yes, their occupancy rate was down ever so slightly, but they were still in at average 55 to 60% throughout lockdown, because you've still got, there's other people that, non-tourists, that need to be there for work for whatever reason. And there's a couple of other sort of holiday-led companies that we know who, they've been fully occupied throughout lockdown because they were renting to people working in for the NHS. So people that, you know, couldn't stay in their own house because they've got a family there, and they needed to essentially, you know, while they were working in the hospital, come home and self-isolate. So they had to then be put up in somewhere, and obviously rather than sticking them in a hotel for 2 months or whatever, they put them in these serviced apartments and holiday rental type properties. So that sector actually did, in the right locations, did actually.
I was going to say, because if you take away, let's just take away places like Manchester, or even like places like Birmingham, for example, and London. And let's say we find a smaller town or city now where you're not going to get as much
you're not going to get
tourists for any specific reason. I don't know, let's just say places like Sheffield or Leeds or Newcastle, for example. They're 3 cities I can think of where the tourism sector is not going to be as high, even though they are going to be popular places for serviced accommodation.
Yeah.
I just don't think they're going to be as popular as the big.
I agree with you.
And I think you would struggle a little bit more because of you don't have all you don't have everything. You don't have the big business hub, the train, the international.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It's some of these cities have got a limited number of sectors. When you've got a city like London or like Manchester or like Birmingham, they've got multiple different industries there.
Yeah.
You know, so you've got finance, tech, media, etc. So, you know, even if one area starts to drop down for whatever reason, there's other areas that are doing quite well and they're quite busy.
Yeah.
So I think it's more sustainable from a short-term rental point of view, in my opinion. But no, I think short-term rentals are good. In summary, I think they're good.
Yeah.
You know, yes, your income might be a bit up and down, but there are management companies out there they know that, but they know it's quite a lucrative model, and they'll go, all right, we'll pay you a guaranteed rent for X number of months or years or whatever, and then they know, cool, we're paying that person that, we know we can rent it for that, and we take the margin.
I think you're right. I think if you're going to do this, and you're not going to, put your
time into it,
and just then again, I wouldn't bother doing it. I would just rent it. If you're not willing to book maids, clean it, look after it, who's going to take care of it, who's going to make sure everything's in.
There is a lot of work involved. You've got to get the right system.
It's a job again.
Well, so your booking comes in. Who's going to let them in? Like
Yeah.
I said, who's going to
let them
clean
in?
it? Who's responsible if there's any maintenance? Is it all you? And if you're not based nearby, how do you? Or you're in a different time zone, for example. What happens then? So you need to, if you are going to do it, you need to either have a company that specialises in it, but be prepared that they will charge you quite a hefty fee for it. Usually management fee for this might be more like 20% because they know there's more money in it. Or you've got to then put the systems in place yourself, which is a bit of work. Yeah. So, but no, I think I like it as well. I'm with you. For me personally, I think I like things as predictable and as hands-off as possible. So for me, long-term rentals with a good letting agent is the thing I like
do,
most. I know you like service accommodation. I think it is great as well if you've got the right system in place or a management company. Yeah. HMOs again can be good. I probably wouldn't bother with it again, being completely honest.
I've looked into it a fair bit. I know there's a few people who think that's what you should do, and I think there's even that. I think there's that method where people rent the whole house themselves. Yeah. And then they get an agreement with the owner.
Like rent to rent.
Rent to rent, and then they go and rent the rooms out themselves. And I'm like, that's a lot of work for a little. You're probably going to make. I think did you mention
headache?
It's like you get like £500 a month.
You can make a bit of money, and you can make a bit more.
But it's a full-time job.
It's a full-time job.
If they're not there,
and it is risky as well, because again, if that area all of a sudden becomes an area where you need a license, and you're applying for the license,
and you've rented it out for a year at least. Anyway.
Yeah, or if you then need to get the license, but you don't own the property, and you're classed as the managing agent or whatever, it becomes complicated. But also you run the risk of
not renting the rooms.
And you're liable to pay the
rent.
The rent. But also, what happens if that owner, for whatever reason, doesn't pay their mortgage, and then you don't know that they're paying their mortgage. Yeah. For whatever reason, you just don't know. Their circumstances might change, and you're paying them your £1,000 a month, £2,000 a month, whatever. They're not paying that mortgage. The bank is sending them letters saying you need to pay your mortgage, pay your mortgage. Oh, they're going to go, okay, we're going to repossess the property. All of a sudden, one day, the bank turn up to try and repossess the property, and you've got 4, 5, 6 plus tenants in there. All of a sudden, need to be rehoused. Yeah. And headache.
Headaches. Yeah.
You've got a lot less control. I think that's, for me personally, I think that's one of the most risky investment strategies out there. And I know some people that have done very well on it. I know some people that have done incredibly well, but have then got out of it because it was too much hassle, too much headache. So, but maybe we'll talk about that one another day. Maybe we'll try and get them on actually to talk about it.
Yeah,
get get their take. So yeah, cool. So we've got the 3 main strategies. That's my take on it.
Yeah.
I like the long term. You like the short term.
Service accommodation. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Cool.
Very good. Okay. All right. Thanks.